All right, what's going on, everybody? Today we're going to be building a responsive and fixed navigation bar using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, by default, what you're seeing here is going to be the main or default view of the navigation bar. What we're going to be doing is creating an entirely separate and custom navigation bar for viewports that are less than 750 pixels wide. So let me show you what that's going to be like, and then we'll go ahead and get into the code. So by default, like I mentioned to you, this is the default navigation bar we're going to be using, but once it gets below 750 pixels, you'll see that we remove the navigation links here and replace it with this icon. So when we click on this icon, we're going to actually enable the mobile or the navigation for viewports that are less than 750 pixels. So we have this really cool animation when you click it in, and when you bring it back, it drops down very smoothly. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And we also add this really cool transform property here on the button itself. So that is pretty much what we're going to be building today. So let's head over to VS Code and get started. All right, so here in VS Code, we have our three main files that we will be using for today's project. That is our main.html, our style.css, and also our app.js. Now, I have also included an extra section that you seen earlier, which was the video background overlay. So if you want to include that in your final project as you follow along, you're more than welcome to, but you don't need to. It's not necessarily a part of the navigation. It's just something I added that was an extra. I will leave the links to download these two videos here in the description. So moving on to the main.html, I'm going to paste in the markup to save some time, as I don't want this video to be longer than it has to be, and I feel that this will save a lot of time. So we copied and pasted that in here and we saved it. So let's head into the head section here and talk about what we have going on. So a few things to notice is we have our Google font link right here. So to get Google Fonts incorporated into your project, head over to the fonts.google.com site and look for the one called item. And then once you do that, you can select it. So once you get here to look like this, you can select the style and just simply copy and paste this link tag into your HTML file. And secondly, we have our font awesome link here. So how to get this is you head over to cdnjs.com, search up font awesome, and just copy the link tag right here and paste it in. And finally, inside the head tag, we have our style sheet. So those are the three things we're using for this project in the head section. Now, moving on to the body of this HTML file, we have our markup, and we also have our app.js file linked up here as well. So make sure you do that, as you don't want to forget that. Now, moving on to the markup, we have two children of the body element. We have the mobile nav class, which is housing the mobile navigation. And we also have this nav right here, which has our desktop or our default navigation. So let's break down this HTML here really quick. So like I said, we have the mobile nav class right here. Inside that, we have our icon for the bars, which we will be using to toggle the mobile navigation on and off. We also have a UL, which has all of the LI items for the navigation or the nav links, and we have that as a class of mobile menu, and also some helper classes of slide out and display none, which I'm pretty sure you can assume what those two will do, and we'll get to that when we start doing the CSS. Now, moving on here to the nav, we have a div with a class of nav wrap, which is wrapping the entire navigation. Now, we have two children of this class. We have our A tag, which is housing our logo, which we're using font awesome again, and we're using the HTML5 logo for that. Thought that was pretty fitting. And we also have a class of nav right, which will be on the right hand side of the screen, and it will house the desktop navigation links. As you can see here, we have another UL with a class of desktop menu and 4 of our LI tags. So that is the markup for the navigation. Now, like I mentioned before, if you do want to do this, you're more than welcome to. We have the background overlay of the video. So we have a class of a div with a class of BG here. Inside that class, we have 3 children. We have the div of the class of BG overlay, which would be the overlay that goes over all these videos to darken it up just a little bit. And then we have 2 video tags. One will be for the desktop, and then the one other video tag will be for the mobile. So we have 2 different videos based on whatever viewport you are on. So that is the markup for this navigation project. So let's head over to our style sheet and start styling up this navigation. Okay, so here is what we are left with after we implemented that markup into our HTML file. So obviously we have some styling to do to get this to look like the finished version over here. So let's head over to our style sheet here and start with a simple reset of margin. We're going to put that to 0. We're going to set the padding to 0, and we're also going to set box sizing. Let's see if I can spell box sizing to border box. Okay, that's looking good. And we're also going to want to import our font family from Google, and I have that over here. I'm going to paste it in. So font family of Itsum, and we're going to change this to sans serif as our secondary in case this one isn't available for some reason. And we're going to set the font weight to a default of 400. Now, to start off here, what I'm going to do is actually at the very top of this project, I'm going to import the video properties for our background hero section. So I'll copy and paste these in here and explain what we're doing. So for each of the video class, we're going to have a width of 100%, a height of 100%, and we're going to display the video as a block. For the BG, which is this class right here, we're going to set this to position relative. For the overlay, we're setting it to position absolute relative to the positioning of the background. We're having it to have a background color of black with a 0.2 or 0.20 opacity, top of 0, and we want it to take up 100% of the width and height. And then for desktop video, we want to default this to display none because we are going to be doing a mobile first approach, and we will go ahead and do a media query to display this when it's on or above the media query of 750 pixels. Okay, so let's actually get into some of the markup here that's actually going to be a part of what we want to do. First thing we want to do is we're going to style the eye, which is going to house our icon and our logo. So we're going to set this to a font size, go back up here, of 50 pixels by default, and we want to set this to a color of white. So every icon at the start will be 50 pixels and a color of white, and if we need to change that, we can target it by selecting the class it is in. But for default, we want to set this to 50 pixels and a color of white. Next, we want to target the ULs, which by default we only have 2 of them, but we both want them to be flex. So what we're going to do is we're going to just display this as flex, and it's good because we want them as a row by default, so we're going to leave that as is. And we also want to get rid of the list style, so we're going to put that to none. Okay. Next, we're going to target our LIs, and we want to start with doing a cursor pointer. So when we hover over them, or we're scrolling over them, they switch to a pointer. We're going to do a margin left on each one of 50 pixels to space them out a little bit. We want to do a text transformation of uppercase, and then also a transition of 500 milliseconds ease and all. So the reason why we want to do that is because we're going to do a color change when you hover over it. So we're going to do an LI, and we're going to do hover. Oops, not horizontal. And we're going to do a color, and you know what? I'm just going to copy and paste this in to save some time. Probably could have copied and pasted the whole thing in, but that's okay. So we will be doing a color of 0, 242, 255, and a 90% opacity. So if we save this and take a peek at what we're working with now, you can see things are looking a little bit better. We only have the desktop video, or I think this is the mobile video showing right now because we set the desktop video to none. So we only have one video on the screen now, but you can see when we hover over our navigation links, they have that nice transition color. So, and we no longer see our icon because the background is white, and so are the icons. So let's go ahead and fix that, or we will in a second. So we want to target next the nav itself, the nav tag, and we're going to give that a z index of 1, and you'll see why. Because we're going to set it to a position of fixed, and we don't want it to be overlapped by anything. So giving it a z index of 1 will triumph anything else on the page because by default the z index is 0. Okay, and we're going to set this to a width of 100% because by default it won't take up the whole width that it's allowing with position fixed. We're going to do a background color of 00AFEA, which is a nice blue. We're going to give it a color of FFF, and we're also going to give it a box shadow, which I'm going to copy and paste in here as well. Okay, that is that. Perfect. So now if we take a look at it, it's starting to come together. We still need to not show the mobile by default because we're on desktop version, but we'll get to that when we start addressing the styling for the mobile navigation. next we're going to target the nav wrap. We're going to give this a margin and a padding and a max width. So max width, we're going to set this to 1200 pixels. To center, we want a margin 0 auto, and we want to give it a padding of 20 pixels around each and every side, and we're also going to display this itself as flex. So if we take a peek at this now, you'll see things have got pushed more into the center. We have more padding on the top and bottom, and you won't see the padding on the left and right because we have a max width set, okay? Now we need to get the navigation links on this side, and we need to center them between the logo. So what we can do is, now that we target the nav wrap and we put it as flex, number one, we can set the nav right to flex 1, which means it's going to take up all the space that it can and still leave room for the logo. We're going to display this as flex as well, and we're going to go ahead and justify the content to flex n, which will push it to the right, and we want to align the items into the center so that it's centered between the logo and the bottom, or this top and bottom here, okay? So things are starting to look very good and how they're supposed to be. Now, let's head back to our style sheet because we need to address a few things. So like I mentioned, we're going to be doing a mobile first approach. So what I'm going to do is we're going to put the media query here at the bottom, and we're going to start to address a few things. So media, and we're going to do one for min width of 750 pixels. So that means whenever the screen size is 751 pixels, these styles will take effect, okay? So what we're going to do here is we want to do desktop menu, which we haven't actually targeted just yet, and we'll target it back up here. So we want to display this as flex when it is at a minimum width of 750. Now we can come back over here and we can do, let's see, we can put this right here and do display, or sorry, not display, desktop. Probably could have just copied and pasted this, and we're going to do display none. So now if we go over here, you'll still see it's there, but once we start to shrink things a little bit, you should see it disappear, and it does. Perfect, okay? So now that that's all set, we want to start to target some of the video inside the media query. So if we recall up here, we did desktop video none. So what we're going to want to do is come back over here, and for desktop video we want to set this back to block. Perfect. And then we also want to target the mobile video and do a display none on here. And then the last and final thing we want to do is we want to target this mobile menu button BTN, because by default we don't want this here on the media query or when the screen's larger than 750. So what we can do is just simply copy and paste this in right here, and we can do a display none, save that, let's put another space here, and that should take care of all the media queries we need to do. Everything else will come into play as we start doing our styling. So let's see here. So now we have the desktop menu set to none. Let's start to target the mobile nav. So let's do mobile video, let's do mobile nav. So what we want to do here is we want to display this as flex, and that's all we're going to want to do on this section right here, okay? Next, we want to target the mobile menu, which is going to be the actual menu itself here, and we have a few properties I'm just going to copy and paste in here to save some time, and then I'll explain it as we go, okay? So we have the Z index set to 2, because if you recall, we set the Z index on the navigation to 1. So we want this to overlap that when the navigation is active, all right? Now, by default, the mobile menu has a display of flex, and it is going to be a row, so we want to set that to a column. We're setting this to fixed so that whenever we scroll, if the screen is larger than what we have now, that'll always be centered, always take up 100% of the width it allows. And we have that set right here with our height and width of 100%. We have a background color set to black with a 50% opacity, and we're justifying the content to the center, and we have a transition of 1000 milliseconds ease all. So next we want to do is we want to target our mobile menu LIs to be a little different than the default. So by default, I believe we never changed the LI size. So we're going to change that to 24 pixels. We're going to do a color on there of white. We're also going to text align these to the center. And we want to do a margin left of 0 because by default we put that margin left on the desktop navigation at 50, so we're going to want to get rid of that. And we also want to put a padding of 20 pixels top and bottom, 40 pixels left and right. Next, we want to target the mobile menu button, which we target it right down here when we don't want it to display on the desktop version, but we still need to style it here for the mobile version. So once again, we're going to have to do a z-index of 3 because what's going on here is that this needs to be on top of everything. And in order for that to happen, we need to set it to 3 because this one's set to 2. So we want it on top of that, which is on top of the nav, which is at 1. So put a z-index of 3. We're going to do we're going to want to position this fixed. We want to do a top, from the top, 32 pixels. We want to do a right of 20 pixels, and then we also want to do a transition of 1000 milliseconds. Ease all. Okay. And then the last and final thing I think we need to do, I think I'm missing something. We want to change the font size as well to a little smaller. By default, the mobile menu button will be 50 pixels. We want to reduce that a little bit and set that to 32 pixels. Perfect. So now the last and final thing we're going to do here is, if you recall, we did a really cool rotation on the mobile menu button when it was selected. So how we're going to achieve that is by adding this class using JavaScript, which is going to transform it to 180 degrees. And when we remove it, it'll go back. And that's why we have this transition on here, so it happens in that smooth 1000 milliseconds ease all. So if we save this, head over, you can see now we're left with this. So the one problem we're encountering here is we don't have the class or some of the helper classes here on the project just yet. So for example, we don't have display none, which is set to get rid of this by default when it's loaded in. So what we want to do is we're going to go back up here and we'll just set this right here. We'll do a dot display none, and we're going to do display none here on this one. Okay, so now if we head over, you can see that now we're left with something similar to what we had over here. Which, why is this one? Oh, I bet you it's because I don't know. Let's get rid of that. So things are starting to look a lot better, but now the only problem is, now when we're mobile, we click this and nothing happens. So we need to start adding some JavaScript to our project here. But before we do that, we need to do some animations here, or we need to create these animations. So there's a few classes I'm going to copy and paste in here so that things will work properly, and you're going to remember these from earlier a little bit. So one of them is slide out, and the other one's going to be slide in, which I'm sure you can assume what those will do, and we'll just paste this right above the image classes, or right below the image stuff. So here we have two animations. We have slide in and we have slide out. Okay, so they do pretty much what they say. So how you make an animation is you do at keyframes, and you name the animation, and then you do your brackets here, and then you have a 0%, 100%, and you can even do other markers, but for what we're doing here, 0 and 100% works just fine. So what we're having it do at 0%, it's on the transform translate Y property. It's going to start at -1000 pixels, and by the time it's complete, it's going to be at 0. And the same thing is in reverse for slide out. We have it start at 0, and then we have it transform to -1000, which is going to slide it out of the frame. So what you need to do to use these is you actually need to create a class, or put them on something. In our instance, we're using helper classes here. So for the slide in, we have an animation property of slide in, which is from up here. We're having it happen over 1000 milliseconds, and the transition type is ease. And the same thing for slide out. We have an animation, a slide out, which is the name of this, 1000 milliseconds, and ease. So that is what we're going to need to start to style some things. So let's go ahead and open our app.js file. Okay, with our app.js file open, we need to do a few things to get the desired effect that we're looking for. So what we need to do is we need to listen for a click on this icon right here with the mobile menu button class. And when that happens, we number one need to do two things. We need to number one, add the class active menu button to this element right here so that we get that transform property we seen earlier where it does a rotation of 180 degrees. And also when we click on this icon or this iClass right here, we need to take some classes on and off the mobile menu, which will be taking off slide out and taking off display none and adding in our animation of slide in. And we have to do the exact opposite when we click on it again if it is active, where we take off slide in and put in slide out and then put back on display none. So to start off with, we need to target two variables here. And as you can see right here, the two variables we're going to be targeting are the mobile menu and the mobile menu button. So the mobile menu refers to this UL right here, and the mobile menu button refers to this iClass. So we need to listen for a click on the mobile menu button. And how we can do that is we'll just copy this right here, paste it, and do an add event listener. And we're going to want to listen for a click. And when we click, we want to run a function, which I'm just going to use an arrow function here. And so every time that the mobile menu button is clicked, we're going to run the code that is inside this code block. So first off, let's start with the menu button first, and then we'll get into the actual mobile menu itself. So we want to add that class onto the mobile menu button. So how we can do that is we can do classless and .toggle. Now, we could do .add and .remove, but that will require a little bit more JavaScript. So it's just easier to use toggle in this scenario. Now, there may be times where toggle may not be useful or may not work, and you'll see that when we get into some of the JavaScript later on in this part of the video. Now, what we're going to want to toggle is we're going to want to do the active menu btn. Okay, so now if I save this, if I head over to our project and I shrink it down to the portion where we have our mobile navigation in place, if I click this, you'll now see that when I click on the icon, it's going to now it's going to be active right now. So I click on it, it'll remove the active menu class, and if I click it again, it'll put it back on, and we're going to get that rotation and transformation property we established in the CSS a little while back. Okay, so now what we're going to want to do is actually bring in the navigation when we click on that button. So what we're going to want to do is now we're going to want to click the mobile menu, and we're going to want to do a classless and .toggle the slide. Oops, I didn't put the parentheses there. We want to toggle slide out, and we're going to save that, and I'm going to copy and paste this down right here. And we want to also toggle the sign in. Okay, so now if we go over here, we should see the effect we're looking for, right? So if I click on it, nothing happens, but you can see that the slide in went in, and now it's gone, and slide out is back. But what you did see here is display none never got taken off. Okay, so let's do the same thing here. Let's do mobile, let's see, mobile menu. We'll just actually toggle it right here. Okay, and we'll do display none. So now we want to display toggle the display none each and every time it clicks. So if I click this, you can see it looks great, it comes in perfectly fine, but if I click it, the effect we're looking for never happens. Now, the reason why it's not happening, or the animation on the slide out's not happening, is because display none is being added right away. So what we need to do is we need to delay that display none if it is active. So we can't just use a toggle method right here, which is what I was saying earlier. It's not going to be useful in every scenario, so we're not going to use that. What we're going to have to actually do is a little bit of an if-else statement. I'm going to copy and paste it in here and explain to you exactly what we are going to be doing. Okay, so what we're saying here is we're looking at the mobile menu, and we're going to want to look at the class list. So we're going to say if this class list on mobile menu contains slide out, we're going to run this code right here. So what we're going to be running is a set timeout method. So after 1000 milliseconds, it will add the display none property. And we're going to say, well, if it doesn't have that class list, just remove the display none so that the transition of slide in can happen. Okay, so now if we go over here and we click on this, you should see that it comes in smoothly and it also comes out. Perfect. It's exactly what we're looking for. Now that that's solved, the one other issue we have is if I resize this to a portion above 750, you can't close out this navigation for the mobile because the icon has disappeared. So one way we can fix that is with a event listener of resize on the entire window. So if I come over here, I'm going to copy and paste this code block in to save a little bit of time, and I'm going to explain it. So what we're doing here, what we're saying is on the window, we can add an event listener of resize, and every time that the window is resized, we're going to call this function. And so we're saying if the window.innerWidth is greater than 750 pixels, run this code. So what we're doing here again is we're going to be doing mobile menu.classless add slide out. We're going to remove slide in, and then we're going to do another set timeout method of 1000 milliseconds so we can still get that transition of it disappearing smoothly. After 1000 seconds, we'll add the display none to our mobile menu. Once again, if I save this, we come over here, we shrink it down, and we click on this, and we resize it. You should see that it now goes away very smoothly and doesn't just never disappear. Okay, so that is going to be the project for the navigation with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If you guys did enjoy, please leave a like down below and subscribe if you are new, and I will see you guys in the next one.